Hi everyone, welcome to today's My Mate in Medicine and Dentistry webinar. I can see there's, wow, a lot of you flooding in. It's always really exciting when everyone joins. I've just launched a poll that you can see on your screen, and that's just to let us know as to what subject that you're interested in learning more about today, or if it's a bit of both, or if you're not sure. Excellent, I can see people are filling out that poll now. You will see a host of panelists in front of you. We have an excellent selection of so many fantastic doctors, dentists, medical students, dental students here to talk you through the process to enter medical school or dental school and what the day in the life of a doctor or dentist is. So please feel free to ask questions, engage in the chat function, and we will try and answer as many of those as possible. My name is Georgia and I am the Director of Partnerships at DebateMate, and I'm going to be hosting this session this afternoon with Hader. Hader?
Hi. Yeah, I'm Hader. I'm a former DebateMate student and I'm also a first year medical student at Imperial College London.
Yes, and we are going to talk you through the application process, like I said, and then we're also going to go into short breakout sessions with the panelists so that you can have an opportunity to speak to them virtually face-to-face and ask them anything that you want to know further to the discussion that we're having now. So I'm going to go around and ask all of them to quickly introduce themselves. Thank you for filling out the poll. I can see that lots of you have answered that. If you haven't, please feel free and let us know what you were interested in learning more about today. So I'm just going to go from my screen. So Tofumi, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please go for it.
Hello, my name is Tofumi Da Costa. I'm currently a second year dental student studying at King's College London.
Excellent, thank you. Yola?
Hi guys, my name's Yola and I have just finished my second year studying medicine at the University of Oxford.
Excellent. Arthur?
Oh, hi guys, my name's Arthur. I've just finished my first year of training in my new job in Grantham as a doctor.
So F1, just finished first year foundation as a doctor. Excellent, thank you Arthur. Shireen?
Hi everyone, my name is Shireen. I'm a recent graduate from King's College London studying medicine, and I'll be starting work in August.
Brilliant, thanks Shireen. Jack?
Hi guys, I've just come to the end of my first year of finishing DF1, so I'm a dentist. So yeah, I'm in Cambridge.
And which university did you go to, Jack, before you?
Yes, so I went to Plymouth Peninsula Dental School. Excellent,
thanks Jack. Okay, Laura?
Hey everyone, my name's Laura. I'm just finishing my F2 year. And I've been doing that at the Royal London Hospital in East London, and I actually did my training here as well, so at Bart's Medical School, part of Queen Mary.
Excellent, thank you. Molly?
So my name's Molly. I'm a interim F1, so I just graduated from medical school in April, and I went to Plymouth University, and I'm working now in Torbay Hospital, which is in Devon.
Yes, and Molly, where will you be doing your F1 training?
So I'm doing my F1 in Gloucester.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Excellent. Okay, let's see. For everyone watching, I can see that there are some questions that are starting to be asked in the chat, and I can see the Q&A is going. Please feel free to submit your questions for our panelists. And in the meantime, let's get started. Hader, I'm going to now share my screen so that we can start the presentation. But if you would like to lead us into that, let's go for it. So, okay. Ooh. Go. Okay, brilliant. It's so boiling hot. Okay, Okay, so this is the overview of the session today. So we're going to quickly do application process and then we're going to go through our breakout sessions. So Hader, if you would like to start us off for our first section of the...
Right, so the first question you need to be able to ask when you're applying to medicine or dentistry is, why are you like choosing medicine or dentistry? You need to be able to, and like the best way to do this is through these like areas that we've mentioned in the slide. So do work experience like in a healthcare setting and read about it. So I think what we're going to do is going to go around and ask the people, our panelists today, what they did to help them answer the question, why medicine or why dentistry?
Absolutely. And I think as well, thinking about it from whether you're in year 9 or year 10, or whether you're slightly older, maybe in sixth form, starting to think about it sooner rather than later, or if not, then maybe that's something to consider later on or during your first degree. So let's ask, let's start with Molly. If I could come to you first and ask you, just from your experience and back when you were 16 or a bit younger, thinking about what you wanted to do, what were the sorts of things that you were thinking about that drew you to medicine?
So I actually came to deciding I wanted to choose medicine relatively late. So I decided I wanted to do it when I was in my second year, between my first and second year of sixth form. So probably later than a lot of people. I think it's really important to, when you're thinking about why medicine or dentistry, to actually think about the answer to that question, not just for that application, but the answer to that personally. Why actually do you want to do it? Is it because you like the science side of it? Is it because you like talking to people? Is it because you think that the career is interesting and has got lots of different things to it? I think they're all really good reasons to want to do medicine personally. And then pick one of those things that draws you to it the most and do a bit of reading around it and decide if that is a true reflection of what it is. I know a lot of people, for example, who wanted to do medicine because they like science, and actually a lot of the science elements of it aren't as much in medicine as in other things. So I think that's a really good place to start, I would say. And I think getting work experience, if you can, is really, really important. It helps you see what actually happens in hospitals a bit more, and if that's an environment you like, because that's another really important thing to consider if you're thinking about applying to medicine.
I definitely agree. And I would say something to note on there is also, it is definitely important to be able to answer that question to yourself, because I'm only in first year and there are definitely points where you'll ask yourself that question again and again, and you're like, why am I doing this to myself? And I think that's probably holding more and more true for how even people who are doing their F1 year and F2 year right now, where it's been a very challenging year, and I imagine people are still asking themselves that. So I do agree that, like Molly said, it is a very important foundation that you didn't just Google a clever response to the question for your interview and your personal statement, that you truly do have a reason to do it, because it's not an easy degree. Like, unlike other degrees, it's quite, it generally leads to practicing medicine. That's quite a challenging thing. So I definitely agree. Making sure you know why you're there is really important.
Absolutely. Yola, when you were thinking about medicine as your future career or the course that you wanted to do at university, what sorts of things did you think about when making that decision?
So I actually was the same as Molly. I was actually really confused at what I wanted to do, and so I ended up deciding in the summer between year 12 and year 13, which again I felt was quite late at the time. For me, what helped was looking at the subjects I was doing at my A levels at the time. So I did the classic like maths, biology, chemistry, and I also had history in there as well. And like I realized that I was a lot more drawn to biology and chemistry, which kind of gave me an idea of what I wanted to do at university. And I think the biggest thing for me was being able to attend summer schools. So I did one in chemistry and then another in biomedical sciences. And when I went to the chemistry one, I hated it. I was like so bored the whole time. I really wasn't interested in the subject, despite chemistry being my favorite subject at A level. And then when I went to biomedical sciences, I kind of got a glimpse of the things that medics study. And I think that was like the first true sign that it would be something that I'd really want to study. So that was the biggest thing for me. For work experience, I didn't actually manage to get a lot, probably because I decided so late. So for me, I did like a couple of courses online on places like Future Learn, which kind of gave me some form of insight. And my volunteering placement was probably the best insight as well, because you kind of get a gist of what it means to care for people, and that like person-to-person contact. So those are the things that helped me.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, definitely. I think there are lots of different ways that you can have experience in a healthcare setting or in a clinical setting that don't necessarily have to be just through work experience. I think there are lots of different ways that people experience that, for sure. I'm going to also come to, before we move on, I'm also going to come to Jack, just to ask you about, for a dentistry point of view, and if that's similar, in the same way that you need work experience and that sort of thing for applying for dentistry.
Yeah, so when I was, I think I wanted to pursue a career in dentistry when I was about 13 or 14, so quite early. But for me, I always wanted, it was between medicine or dentistry, and I kind of chose dentistry because I wanted something that was a bit more hands-on. There's quite like an artistic element to dentistry, as well as there's quite a lot of material science. So it's kind of a good mix of medicine, engineering, and artistry. So for me, I thought that was a bit more diverse and I would get a bit more fulfillment out of that. So that's kind of why I chose dentistry. In terms of work experience, I think it's an excellent idea. You can literally go into most dental practice and ask to do a bit of work experience, which is what I did. So I did quite a bit in the end, and it just highlights to me that I was very interested in it. So yeah, definitely look at that, because I know a few of my friends went to do some work experience and then they saw one filling and they were like, no, it's not for me. So definitely worth doing the work experience just to see if it's something you're interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to quickly move on to the next slide. Okay. So, Hader, I'm going to ask you as well to help me lead this next bit, and I'm going to explain what that sort of Excel sheet is as well. But moving on to which medical or dental school, I think we had so many questions submitted. Thank you so much to all of you that asked questions beforehand about A-levels, GCSEs, even subjects. Yola mentioned earlier that she was really into biology and chemistry, but also history as well. And actually you can do that when you are applying for medicine and dentistry. You don't just have to stick to sciences and maths fully. You can do a mixture. I know it's the case with Molly as well. So when thinking about where to apply, it's really interesting because all the different medical schools and dental schools will require something different. There are lots of similarities, but actually they may be looking for different things. They maybe have different entrance requirements. They may have different GCSE grades or A-level grades that they're going to be asking for. So I'm going to ask, Hader. Oh, yeah. So Hader, when thinking about applying to university yourself, when you were considering which medical school to apply to, what were the sorts of things that you were looking at first and weighing up?
So the thing with me is I took a gap year before I applied to work full-time. It was a personal decision. Before I even got my results, I didn't apply. So I looked at the entry requirements first of all to see where I could go, because by that point I already had my grades. And then I think it is also important to look at subjects, because while the majority of medical schools will simply look for chemistry and biology, some of them may look for specifically an A-star on one of the above. Some of them may also want you to have done math, which I didn't do. I studied chemistry, biology, and psychology. So I had to look at which medical schools would be worth applying to. For example, at least in the year I applied, the University of Cambridge don't tend to go for students who apply without maths. And so like it was kind of like looking at those kind of things. And then GCSEs as well, seeing if I was ruled out of any universities interview process based on GCSEs. There are very few unis which do consider it, but it was that. And then once I'd narrowed that down, then it became, what do I want from a uni? So what kind of course where is it? I ended up applying only to London universities, so I could live at home. But then other people take other things into consideration, such as, you know, I think a very, very big thing, which played in a lot more after I had my offers, was what is the vibe of the university? It's definitely worth visiting every university you're applying to see if you actually like it, because you'll be there for a very long time, 5 to 6 years. Oh, that's another thing, the length of the course. Medicine courses can either be 5 or 6 years, so there's definitely worth looking into that as well.
Yeah, I'm going to come to Arthur next, and I wanted to just ask about, when thinking about strategy, like Hader just said, when thinking about when you're weighing up the different types of universities you want to apply for, why is it really important to make sure that you have a kind of a structure like the one we see in front of us, or we weigh up which universities we're looking at?
Is that my cue?
Yes.
The beautiful Excel spreadsheet you see before you is what I used to try and get into medicine. Unfortunately, medicine is very difficult to get into, and there's places that I would like to get into and places that would actually take me. Unfortunately, sometimes there's a discrepancy between the two. So I went through all 30 medical schools, and on their websites they normally have what their requirements are, and these, like Eddie said, requirements go from GCSE, A level, sort of what sort of candidate they're looking for. They'll use certain key values normally, and also things like what aptitude test they use. And I found it quite helpful to put it into a spreadsheet, and then I could see, because I had a B in English language, I wasn't able to apply for a lot of medical schools, so I was able to just cross those off straight away. And then quite quickly I was left with sort of a selection of medical schools that would take me. And I thought that was a really useful way of looking for where I could apply.
Yeah. I think that was a really good way of doing it, actually, and putting it all in a page in front of you, which is why we thought it was a good idea to just put an example of it here, just so that, because there are so many different things that universities are looking for, sometimes it can just be helpful to have it all in one place.
And I guess what I'd like to say further to that is, many people think that you need 3 A stars to get into medicine, and there are universities that are looking for 3 A stars, like I'm sure Jola did particularly well in her A levels. But there are places, for example Plymouth, that you can have 3 A stars, but once you reach the minimum requirement, which would be like 3 A's, they're also looking for your personal statement and things like your UK CAT. I know that there are some places that would give you like automatic interview if you did particularly well on the UK CAT, so it's just worth looking at that.
Absolutely, that's a really good point, in that different universities will have different requirements. You don't necessarily have to have 4 A stars or 3 A stars in order to be considered. And things like, sorry, Hader, is that?
Yeah, I was going to say also something to note on that is, even at the most academic or selective seeming universities like Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, even if you have, you don't always need to have all the A stars either. There are people in my year who I know got in with 3 A's, and I know people who also get into Oxford and Cambridge with A star, AA, or even 3 A's if they did very, very well in other areas. But there are also people who get all A stars and still don't get an offer from these places, because you need to be well-rounded in other areas too.
Yeah, absolutely, and we will.
And just one more point on the application process. Also, all medical schools they're regulated by the GMC, and the same for dentistry schools. And the end game is to make you all into doctors. So I think it doesn't, in my opinion, from having worked with many different sort of students of different medical schools.
But then the GMC will make, so they're the body that regulate doctors, and dentists have a similar body, and it means that each course at each university is going to be regulated by them to ensure that people can practice. So even though you may have a different type of course, you may go to a different university, you will be a doctor at the end. So it's definitely worth considering.
That's the goal, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
For me anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm going to kind of go on to aptitude tests because you may have heard that they're being mentioned. Thank you so much to everyone who is submitting questions. There's lots of questions about A-levels and GCSEs, and thank you so much. I hope that a lot of them have been answered, but if not, then I will come back to them at the end and make sure that that's very, very clear. And I got a question as well from Mabel. She said, does studying languages help in medicine? And definitely you can study languages as well as having your science and maths subjects. I think that, like Yola said, she also did history at A-level as well. So there are other subjects that you can take that aren't just science and maths. I'm going to quickly now go on to aptitude tests because that's also a really important part of the application process. And the aptitude tests are additional to your academic grades. They're going to be looking for other aspects of how you think and how you work that aren't just through your A-levels or your exams. And they'll test you on things like decision making and verbal reasoning. And I'm going to come to Tofunmi to ask you about your aptitude test experience and how you found it. Which ones did you do, and what helped you prepare?
Well, for dentistry, I knew already that there was only one university that needed the BMAT, and all the other unis needed UCAT at the moment, which was previously called UKCAT. The only university that required it was Leeds, so I decided not to do the BMAT, only to sit the UKCAT for personal reasons. And that was literally just because the UKCAT, I'd get my results on the same day, and I preferred that option of being able to sit my exam, and at the end of the exam I come out and I have my results. So just to like break down the UKCAT, I have some notes here. It's basically just an aptitude test that just covers loads of different aspects. It's very time constrictive. A funny story, on the day I literally was so scared that like before the exam I was vomiting so heavily. It was crazy. Like I thought it was honestly so crazy. It was a crazy day, but I came out with a decent result and was able to apply to uni. So it honestly, don't let the nerves get ahead of you, because it all comes together at the end of the day. And I would especially advise to just revise and make sure that when I say revise, I mean the stuff that you're not good at, hone in on it, because it shows so heavily on the UKCAT which parts of the test that you weren't as good at and which parts of the test that you didn't show much attention to when you were practicing. So for me it was definitely verbal reasoning, because it was quite hard for me to get, but that was one piece of advice I definitely pass on, is to definitely the stuff that you don't understand quite well, hone in on it, make sure that you really get it, so that on the day of the exam nerves don't get to you and you're still able to push through and go to the next section and keep moving on and persevering, to be honest.
Absolutely, because it's such a different type of exam than you may have taken before.
So different.
But having said that, like you said, there are so many resources online that are made available so that you can practice. And we have a lot of questions about this. And one question was, how many weeks does it take to revise?
Oh my days. I always knew I wanted to study dentistry. So as soon as I hit year 12, I hit the ground running and started revising for the UKCAT. And then I took my UKCAT in the summer because I just wanted to get it over and done with and move on to the next thing. So I'd say, well, as soon as you know what you want to do, as soon as you know that you want to do dentistry and medicine, I'd say go ahead. There's no harm in trying to learn. But I'd say the intensive stuff really started 6 weeks before the exam. Like a month is really intensive. I used Kaplan. The online resources were amazing. Like I really loved it. You could track your progress. It was fantastic. They also gave out so many facts, and I think the website Medic Mind was quite good as well, quite resourceful, and really helped me understand what it is that they're looking for in the UK CAT and understand it generally.
Definitely.
But can I say, so I sat the UK CAT twice, and the first time I sat it, I didn't know that I had to sit it until about 3 weeks before, because I came to apply to medicine quite late, and my school that I was at were not particularly supportive with the application process because they'd had no one go through it in a number of years. So I didn't realise until really late on that I needed to revise for it. So I did a short amount of revision before it and did it on the last day that you can feasibly do it because there were no slots left. The following year when I did it, I revised for about a month. I knew that I had to revise. I also used CAT-Plan, and I had booked it well in advance, and I improved my score from being just above average to being pretty near the top. And I really think that that helped me actually get into medical school in the end. So I would say that I don't think you need to go mad, but there's an atmosphere around them that you can't prepare for them. You can prepare for them, and you should. And not just doing revision, but actually being aware that you need to do it, being comfortable with the type of question, having it booked in advance. It is something to think about. If you haven't, don't panic, but I really do think it is a useful thing to be thinking about.
Yeah, that's really key.
Absolutely.
Because I didn't, and the difference was stark.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of people do say that because there's that air about them that you can't prepare for them, that sometimes that means that the practice isn't, I don't know, that the practice isn't emphasized, but actually if you repeat it again and again and again, they can get a bit more comfortable to do and complete. Hader, what did you use when preparing for your UCAT and BMATs?
Okay, so recently redone my desk, so I actually have the book right here. I used this one. Yeah, it's a book of questions. It's very useful. And as well as, and they have the same company, I think this is ISC Medical, also have a book of a couple hundred questions for the BMAT as well. But primarily I use the resources that each of the websites give. So Cambridge Admissions, who run the BMAT, give you a virtual textbook with all of the information that they may assess you on in the science section, and they give you past papers. And then I use Medic Portal because they have, I think, some of the most reliable advice. They kind of take bits and pieces from everywhere. And then the UK CAT have official practice UK CAT questions, about 400 of them. So I also use that as well because it's on the computer and it's in the format that the UK CAT use. So yeah, I think there are, like everyone's been saying, there are two big things you need. One is familiarity with the test, which you usually can only really get from the most official source, which is the website itself, and spend a bit of time understanding what it is the test will be like. And then from there, I've heard Medify, I've heard CAT-Plan. This book is very popular for getting in the practice. And I think those are like kind of important things. Yeah,
Definitely. So just to summarize what was said there about the BMAT and UCAT, some universities will ask for BMAT only, some will ask for UCAT. Again, on that spreadsheet that we looked at in the last slide, that would be a really good place to make a note of which universities will require which aptitude tests.
Yeah, one thing I think we should quickly touch on is just a lot of people are asking the format. So very, very briefly, like mentioned on the slide, the UCAT consists of, I think, 5 sections now. So you have verbal reasoning, which is you'll be given a lot of text and then you'll be asked questions about it. For example, you might have a paragraph from a news article and it might ask you which one of the following is a logical conclusion, and you need to be able to figure that out. You have quantitative reasoning, which is maths, but very, very puzzly maths. So you may need to pay attention to details and be able to do mental arithmetic or use the on-screen calculator. Decision making, which is classical puzzles, like if you ever did an online IQ test and they give you like a strange puzzle, like, okay, this is this and this person has this, what does this person have? Or Venn diagrams that are very complicated and you to interpret, that's decision making. You then have situational judgment, which is they'll give you a scenario and ask you if this is a good solution to it. So for example, you're in medical and you have someone cheating, what do you do? And each of these will, and then you have abstract reasoning, which is the last one, where you'll be given a set of abstract images and you need to be able to recognize the patterns. So that's the UCAT. You can find so much more information online. And the BMAT is in 3 sections. Section 1 is your aptitude and skills, which is a mix of the above. So you'd have verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, decision making, kind of puzzle questions in section 1. Section 2 is science. So that's what I mentioned. They give you a book, a virtual book, which covers GCSE, biology, chemistry, physics, and maths. And they'll ask you actual questions based on that content, but they'll be tricky. They won't be in depth. They won't ask you like, oh, what can X medicine do to the kidney? But they will ask you, based on what you should understand of the function of the kidney from GCSE, how would which one of these things might be true or false? And then the last one is the writing task, which is something you really need to get to grips with. It is a 1 A4 page essay writing task, essentially. And you get a number of very strange statements. They might ask you to give reasons for and against why you may agree with it, or what do you think this person means. So it might say I don't know, Dumbledore said that the best way to find happiness, even in the dark space, is just to remember to turn on the light. What does he mean by this? Give some reasons to support and some reasons to refute what he's saying. And in that way, they want to see how you communicate. But yeah, so that's the structure of both tests. And you can find out a lot more online, and there are loads and loads of pieces of advice we could probably give you in the breakout sessions later if you are specifically interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Hader. There are a few questions as well about when you take the aptitude tests and how they work in terms of the application, but we will definitely cover that now, actually, because we're going to be talking about personal statement and what the personal statement is and why it's so important. Laura, I'm going to come to you. And I just wanted you to just explain or describe what sorts of things that you included in your personal statement and why, and what actually is the personal statement if people are hearing about it for the first time in relation to UCAS and the application process.
So I came to my decision to do medicine even later than most people do. So I was actually in my final year of doing my psychology undergraduate degree at UCL. And so I had already gotten a fair amount of experience in writing personal statements from applying to undergraduate. And the personal statement is essentially, it's like a 1-page summary of why you want to do the course that you're applying for and what you think that you could bring to the course. And I think that medicine is a particular challenge because obviously you've got a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different skills all applying for the same thing. And I think my advice would really be come up with a story. And I don't mean a story as in like, oh, one day I was walking down the road. I mean more of like a narrative. So as we were saying at the beginning, think about the things that interest you. Think about why you actually want to be doing medicine. And then tie those things in to make one page that's interesting to read, essentially. So things that I included were the fact that my mum was a doctor and that put me off doing medicine for a really long time. I included things like football because I love playing football, but also it's a team sport. And one of the things that I love about medicine is that actually when you're working with physiotherapists and your nurses and your senior doctors and your junior doctors, really what that is a team sport. With a ton of different positions, everybody has a different role. And so working things in like that. So a lot of people will be saying things like, I want to help people and all of that. And that's totally reasonable. But to make it individual, I would say try and give it a narrative, try and give it a story so that someone who's reading it is reading something that's interesting about you and not so much like about a course or specifically what they're asking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, like you said, when building a narrative, it's your opportunity to show the university what sort of candidate you are. And like you said, that you enjoy working in a team, you enjoy that sort of camaraderie that you had with medicine that you may have decided later on, as opposed to when you were younger, because you said about your mum being a doctor as well. I think with personal statement, it can be slightly daunting when you first think about writing it, but actually if you break it down into categories of thinking about why you wanted to do medicine and the ways that you're showing why you want to do medicine and how you're going to be most well suited for it. Eventually it gets to the point where you have too many words, and part of the issue with the UCAS application is actually cutting it down. Yola, I wanted to come to you and ask what about your experience with your personal statement and your UCAS application generally, and how you tackled it and went about tackling it?
Yeah, so once I decided the universities I was going to apply to, I applied to Oxford and Imperial as part of my options, and so I knew that my personal statement had to be skewed a little bit for those two universities to show like an increased interest in the scientific component, particularly at Oxford, because the first 3 years are completely like segregated from actual medicine. You're just kind of looking at the scientific aspects of it. And so the way in which I did that, and I was actually advised to do it in this way, was to start off by talking about how my subjects have led to an interest in medicine. And then I spoke about my summer schools a little bit, I spoke about my work experience, and then at the end, I spoke about my like debating, because I was a former debate student, so I spoke about my experience in debating. But what I learned by going to like the summer schools and the advice that they gave me was that like roughly 80% of your personal statement should be to do with, you know, the degree you're trying to do and everything you've done that supports that. And then maybe 20% at the end could be talking about your own hobbies to kind of describe you as a person. The Oxford and Cambridge used to always talk about super curriculars, which is kind of like showing them that you've got a really like big increased interest in your subject without saying that. So rather than saying I have a passion for medicine, showing them. And the way in which they said that they found that to be shown successfully was by doing extra courses online that are free. You don't have to pay for any of that. Extra reading, like I read books on medical ethics because, you know, we'd had discussions on medical ethics and debating. So those are the kind of things that I mentioned in my personal statement, just to show them that I was really interested. And in terms of work experience, a lot of people that I've spoken to found that they did so much that they couldn't actually speak about it in their personal statement, like to its full depth. So it's just something to think about when you're applying, that don't focus on just one aspect of preparing yourself. You kind of have to be like quite well-rounded in what you do, kind of like strategies, think about it.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, that you do have one personal statement for every university you apply for. And so you have a UCAS form that is sent off to every university. So you can't write a different personal statement for each individual university. So like Yola said, thinking about possibly the ones that you most want to go to, or the ones that you're best aligned to, and thinking strategically that maybe that might be the best sorts of things to include in your personal statement. Maybe that's work experience heavy, maybe that's extracurricular heavy, maybe that's a combination of the two. So that's definitely true in thinking about personal statements and UCAS. Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to go next on to interviews. When UCAS is, the application is sent off, the deadline is always the 15th of October. So it's right at the beginning of the academic year. And like all of our panelists have said, you can apply it possibly at different times. Some people do it at the final year of school, some people do it after taking a gap year, some people do it after their degree. So it's completely, it differs from person to person, but usually you send off, when you send off your application, you will then hear back possibly about an interview. And I'm going to come to, oh, Reese. Hi, Reese, you've joined us at perfect time.
Hey, what's up?
Hi, welcome everybody. This is Reese. Reese is joining us from work. Thank you so much for joining us. And he, as along with Yola and Hader, also was a former DebateMate student as well, and is now working. Reese, did you graduate this year as well?
Yeah, I literally graduated like 2 months ago.
And how's it been so far?
It's very busy.
Yeah.
Very, very. You know, I didn't expect to graduate this soon. I should be in Sri Lanka right now, and instead I'm at St Mary's. So, a bit peak, but there you go.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been an unexpected time the last couple of months for sure, especially for all doctors and dentists and all healthcare workers working through COVID. But as we are talking about the interview process, I just wanted to highlight first of all about the different types of interviews. There are traditional interviews and MMI, which are kind of like short stations with different problem-solving activities. But I'm sure everyone else can describe that better than I can. So I'm going to ask Jack to kick us off with your interview process when you were interviewing for dentistry. How did it go, and what sorts of things are they looking for when you're being interviewed? Oh, and I think you're on mute, but that's fine.
Sorry, I've got it. Yeah, sorry.
No worries.
So I know that, so I went to Plymouth Peninsula, for those that kind of forgot, but for us, I know that they didn't really look at the personal statement much, because they didn't want, basically they thought kind of, these kids have had their parents write their personal statements, so I'll just interview you. So they didn't really look at our personal statements, so they just kind of, we had to pick an ethical scenario, where we had to, I remember one of the ethical scenarios was, you have a Down syndrome patient come into the practice, what do you do? And so it was kind of, they asked me about the ethical implications of that. So it wasn't the easiest interview ever, but if you break down the individual elements, it wasn't too bad. But then they were kind of asking me what I do outside of study, because I think, as was touched on earlier, most people will get, not most people, but like people will get the 3 A's and above, but it's what sets you apart from the others. So I know I did like Duke of Edinburgh and a few other things like that. So they asked me a lot about those types of things and how those would help in a dental career. So for
like
example,
curricular, like kind of like keeping it, how have you shown leadership?
Yeah, exactly. So for example,
out just outside, not just your academic work.
Yeah, so exactly, that's it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to think about when thinking about interviews. Like Yola said with a personal statement, I think it's been a common strand throughout this whole past 30 minutes is thinking about how you are as a rounded person at not just your academic work, and actually thinking about what sets you apart from all the other candidates as well. I'm just going to stop screen share before we go on to the next section and just see if we can answer any other questions.
Could I just quickly interject quickly?
Yes.
There's, I know if you look on Student Room or Medic Portal websites, quite commonly medical schools won't change their interview questions from year to year. And
so you can practice.
Well, okay, you can practice, and you can predict with quite a lot of accuracy in some cases what the questions are going to be when they come up. So you can prepare that way as well.
Yeah. So sort of like almost like past paper questions, how you use past paper questions. I know I'm just relating it to a GCSE or like an A-level equivalent, but you can look online, and there are so many different resources. Also, the book that Hayder showed earlier with all his UK CAT questions, there are plenty of those with interview scenarios as well as what Arthur said about having medical school questions come
but I mean,
well.
like a lot of medical schools will just do the same questions year after year is what I'm trying.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
I was on there, so I think it's really useful to look at interview questions, but I was on the panel for the interviews for the medical school this year, and I would say that there's a fine line between being prepared and knowing what you're going into with an interview is really helpful. I wouldn't practice specific answers to specific questions, and I wouldn't try, I think knowing the format of the interview and knowing what you're going to be asked is brilliant, because then you can answer with confidence, you're not thrown by anything. But I think if you sound rehearsed, then you just go, well, they've just rehearsed. I don't know anything about them. They've just rehearsed. And versus somebody who comes across well, but doesn't come across as rehearsed, you're going to go for the person who comes across well. Because if you're rehearsed, you're not telling them anything. And it reflects as much as being underprepared, I would say. That would be my
It's really interesting that you were on the panel for interviews when people were practicing, or when you saw people come in for real interviews. Was it funny seeing people come in and you being on the opposite side? Was that a bit strange to watch that happen?
It's just a bit, it takes you back a bit, I think. And also, you were so worried about being nervous, but actually people coming across as nervous, you view completely differently from the other side. So I think it is interesting.
Does anyone have, just speaking of nerves, because I think that must be so nerve-wracking, doing the UCAT, doing interviews. Does anyone now, kind of a couple years later, have any sort of tips for that? Or is it always going to be as nerve-wracking as it is when you're younger? Tofumi, yes.
Yeah, I'm someone that just gets severe anxiety when it comes to, like, I'm really good at talking to people one-on-one, but in the interview process and, oh, they're judging me, I got extremely anxious about it. But what I would say is, what helped me specifically is that for my 5th university, I applied to Leeds Dental Hygiene and Therapy, which required an interview process. So that was before any of my other interviews, which helped me a lot because they actually gave out a booklet and told us what stations were going to be there. And like, I had time to prepare. I was able to understand what was going on. I thought it helped me a lot to understand the interview process. I wouldn't say it's for everyone to do, but it did help me in order to understand the interview process. Also, practicing with mates is a big one. Practicing with teachers is very, very big. Being able to answer and sound like a conversationalist, it's really, really key, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. That is good. That's interesting that you had that interview initially that actually really helped. I can imagine if you didn't have that, just your first interview in general, I can't even imagine what that must have felt.
It was still,
even
then it was still traumatic because it was at Manchester. It was at Manchester University, and it was just like, it was so olden and just very archaic, and just but I'm just not an interview person personally, but like it was very interesting to go through, a very interesting procedure.
Sure. Reese, I would love to hear from you because I know that you may have to leave us soon, but what for you when you were interviewing or when you were doing your application process, looking back now, what would you say about nerves and preparedness? And
I think you're always going to be nervous. You know, you're 17, 18. It's kind of nuts to be in front. At Imperial, it was a panel of 5 people, one of which was a student. And it's kind of crazy, but obviously doing something like debating, you get used to talking in front of people. Yeah. They ask a lot about what you do outside of medicine, because everyone does the same things. They all do work experience. They all, you know, read the BMJ and stuff like that. It's all about what you do kind of outside medicine and what you're actually going to bring to the medical school that's important. And just try and be comfortable with the interview as much as possible. All of my friends who did really well and got into the interviews all say the same things. They cracked a load of jokes, they smiled a lot, they had a good time. It was really enjoyable. And all the interviews that I kind of failed in my time applying were the ones where I didn't enjoy them, I didn't make any jokes, I couldn't be me in the interview. So, you know, the first couple might be quite difficult, but by the time you get to the 4th one, you'll be gold. And if you're doing something like debating, you'll be much better at kind of public speaking anyway, so that makes it much easier.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'll definitely emphasize that it is at times surprisingly similar to a debate. My interview at Barts, which is the is it Queen Mary's University Medical School, essentially they tell you to read an article and they ask you what is the equivalent of rapid fire points of information about it. So they ask you questions about your perspective. What do you think the future of robotics in medicine would look like? Because I think that was the topic of the article, and they would like ask you, okay, what do you think of that? How would you justify this? And then when it comes to other interviews, like for example, at Imperial, they might ask you a slightly abstract question, and then depending on what you say, like push you to defend what you initially said. And it is very much a thinking on the spot, but just, I would say, like Reese said, have fun with it. Because ultimately they are just trying to look at who you are as a person, because by this point they have your test scores, they have your grades, they really want to just get to know you and try and get that across. Don't try and come across as the ideal medical student and try and, you know, look online for what they want you to say, because a lot of these interviews have been through the system a lot, and so they'll recognize things like very rehearsed answers or very textbook answers. They want to see you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that was definitely the central theme of, again, a lot of the advice was to be yourself and to not necessarily be too rehearsed, but also to make sure that you do practice, but be comfortable. And I like that, Reese, when you were talking about, you know, cracking some jokes, laughing, and actually it makes you feel more comfortable. It also makes, I imagine, the interviewers also feel more comfortable, and also makes you stand out as well, because they'll remember that you were a candidate who actually came across as quite confident and more relaxed. If that's possible for when going into interviews. I think that's really good advice. Thank you so much. I can see that there are lots of Q&As, questions. And I think what we're going to do now is we're going to quickly talk about just the last part of the application process, and then we're going to quickly go into the breakout rooms. So Hader, would you just like to quickly tell the students about what happens when you receive an offer, and kind of the sorts of things to think about?
Yeah, sure. So around, I would say it's usually between February and April when you get your offers, because interviews happen generally between January and March, and you get a response within about a month of your interview for most medical schools. If you are applying a pre-qualification, which means before you've done your A-level exams, then you'll get a conditional offer, and this will often, they'll give you like X grades that they expect you to get. So for example, you may get an offer for A-star AA to study medicine at, say, UCL. That would mean that, and then etc., etc. And then when it comes to around, I think it's June, early June or late May, depending on when you got your last offer, you need to select which offers you want to go for. And also this is before you got your grades, so you need to take into consideration what you honestly think you will get as your grades. And you pick two offers. You pick a firm, which is the one you want, and an insurance. So one you would go to in case you miss the first offer. So you would ideally go for two that have different offers. Generally, people will go for example, the one they want to get into, which might have a slightly higher offer, and then one that they will go to if they miss that, which has a lower offer. So, for example, you could get med school A, which offers you A-star, A-star A with an A-star in maths and chemistry, which is a pretty specific offer. And then you could have med school B, which offers you 3 A's, but it's not the one you want to go to. So you would firm the higher one, the one that you definitely want, the one that you want to go to, and you'd put your insurance down as the one which you'd go to in case you miss that. In the event that you do miss all of your offers, there are options out there. So on the day of results, they open up what is called clearing, and clearing is essentially universities will open up spaces that they still have. So the first thing I would say you do on the day is you get your grades. Even if they don't meet your offer, you would want to call up the university or check on your UCAS and check if you still got the place. Because sometimes you can miss the grade offer, but if the university really likes you, they may still give you the place anyway. So I know people who got an offer for A-star AA and firmed it, got 3 A's on the day, but the medical school still let them in. So you just need to check that. If you miss it by 1 grade, for example, if you got A-star AB, I would still say it's worth calling up a university and talking to them, because sometimes you can still, ask them, this is what happened, and they may consider you still. And then you have clearing. Clearing is, they open up some spaces. So if you missed it, you can ask, and some medical schools will say, okay, here's what we can offer you. Sometimes they may offer you a space to study biomed for 2 years, and then if you're in the top 10% of your top 10% or top 20% of your year, they'll then transfer you into first year medicine. So you'll then end up studying for 7 years instead of 6, but you're still going to be going into medicine, etc., etc. So there are a lot of options out there. You just need to breathe on the day once you've accepted your offers and once you've got your results, and talk to your teachers and talk to your advisor, whoever's giving you advice on what to do. And then obviously you can reapply to medicine again and again. So if you miss it the first time, you can reapply the next year. For example, you can redo your UK CAT and your BMAT and get higher scores. You can redo your interviews and all of that. There are some medical schools allow you to retake exams. some do not. So before you consider retaking exams, look at the medical schools you want to go to, because it does severely cut them down. I know only, I think, of 1 or 2 medical schools which really allow retaking A levels.
Has yeah, no, definitely. Or so
Does
right
anyone
here,
have experience
there are
with that?
different ones. There are different. But is anyone on the panel did anyone retake their A levels? Molly?
My A levels.
Yes.
I got I did 4 A levels and I got 2 A's and 2 B's the first time I sat them. And I did resits, and I applied when I did my resits to Brighton and Sussex, Plymouth, Liverpool, and then I applied for 2 places for pharmacy. And I had 3 interviews and I got 2 offers off the basis of having done resits. You are more limited, and for that reason, you get 5 unis you can pick on your UCAS. So I split mine because you are more limited, like you said, Hader. I think there's 5 or 6 in the UK that accept resits, and some of them they want you to have explain the circumstances behind retakes, and some of them you need BMATs. And I think I really wanted to go to uni, so I split mine, but certainly it does not preclude you from medical school at all. You can definitely still go to medical school with resits.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, something I kind of skipped over there is, if you do have exceptional circumstances, the majority of universities are more than happy to talk about that. So if there was, like, this is very like specific set of circumstances, if something very big did happen in your life, which meant that, you know, you really couldn't focus on your exam, something really bad happened, then talk to your university about it, like specifically call up the admissions team. And they do have, like, all universities will have some sort of mitigating circumstances procedure. They may give you a lower offer, they may allow you to retake all of your A levels.
It'd be like, is it more like an individual basis?
Yeah, that's individual basis.
But like, don't get put off like asking them about it or talking about it, because you just never know. And they, like Hader said, are always sort of willing to listen, come to some kind of conclusion about it. Same with like clearing and retakes, like you said. Don't be afraid to call them up and actually just check before. Yeah. Excellent, thank you. Okay, thank you so much to everyone for sharing. In the interest of time and just to make sure that we have everyone's attention, especially for students who are watching, we are now going to go into smaller groups for about 20 minutes, just so that you can then talk to everyone that you can see here on screen a little bit more in a sort of small group environment, and just ask them more of their personal advice. And also, just if you had any questions from what we had discussed just now, particularly if it's to do with specifics about personal statement or entrance requirements. Also, for anyone, we're going to try and put people who are qualified now partnered with a student, so you can actually ask and talk about what life is like doing the job as well. So what I'm going to do and how it's going to work is I'm going to post a link now in the chat, and everyone will then come into one big meeting room, and then we're going to be broken off into smaller groups. So I'll see you all there. It by no means is compulsory. If you would like to finish the session now, or you don't have a camera, or if it's not working, then that's absolutely fine. And thank you so much for joining us, but please do come along to the breakout sessions now. The link is here, and we will see you all there.